This is a call to arms. The Age of Mage has been in full swing for the better part of 2 months, and to be honest, this has been some of the most fun I've ever had in a FromSoft game. And now it is time for this Age of Mage to come to fruition, not to a close. No, I don't think I'll ever necessarily stop making mages in this game. I just find spells to be too ingrained in how I approach the game now. And while I'll definitely make other different types of builds in the future, I don't think I'll ever really get away from making mages for the foreseeable future. So this Age of Mage must reach its peak, and what better way to do that than with an event? That is why I'm calling upon all of you on both PC and Sony consoles to prepare yourselves, and to make a mage for an upcoming PvP event. Now, I know some of you are already about to click off this video, but wait! At least listen to my elevator pitch, or at least part of the tutorial on how to make an effective mage invader. I'm really not asking that you become some sort of multicaster extraordinaire and discard all of your weapons down a well. I've sectioned this video into chapters, so if you're here just to see the tutorial, I'd recommend just skipping to that section now. Otherwise, we're going to talk about the event. So yes, I'm not trying to convert all of you to full-time mages, I'm just asking that you give this playstyle a try. And what better way to try out a playstyle than against a bunch of like-minded goofballs, where there is no pressure to win or be teabagged, no awful dual Naginatas to contend with, no overleveled Moonveil to get one-shot by. I cannot guarantee that there will be no Moonveil at this event, but rest assured that it will be in the hands of a perfectly normal leveled player. This video is one part event announcement and one part effective invader mage tutorial, specifically for those who have always stuck to melee only combat. But let's start with the details of the event first. In order to participate in this event, I have two very lenient requirements. One, you must be a mage, and two, you must have a lore name. When I say you must be a mage, I mean that a spellcasting catalyst, whether it be a glintstone staff or a sacred seal, should occupy one of your hands at almost all times. And you should be casting at least, let's say, 4 different spells, alright? Please don't show up to my event with power stance lances and occasionally cast bestial slaying and declare yourself a mage, okay? This is your opportunity to be creative and self-expressive, so use that opportunity. And second, when I say you must have a lore name, I mean that you should make a name that sounds like it could fit into the lands between. No, you don't have to name drop characters in Elden Ring in order to sound like you fit in, but I'm mostly just looking for vibes here. If you need inspiration, take a look at the list of invaders and summonable NPCs from Dark Souls 2. They had a whole bunch of fantastic lore invaders that had no backstory other than the name above their heads, and I think there's a lot you can do with that. Yeah, I know it's only 16 characters, I wish it was something like 20 or 24, but we can absolutely make do with what we have. The event is going to be taking place throughout the lands between, and most notably in Caelid, the Altus Plateau, Mount Gelmir, and maybe Shifra River if time permits. The structure of the event is that I will be leading a conquest of stars through those areas, which means I will be playing through these areas in co-op with the Taunter's Tongue active. I will be playing through all of these areas at rune level 86, plus 17, plus 7, with Godric's rune active so I don't get obliterated for wearing a Sword Seal. Rune level 86 is a tiny bit high for plus 17 weapons, and that's intentional. Ideally, I want to be invaded by people who are making builds for around rune level 80 plus 17 plus 7, because that's a great range for invader activity these days. It's kind of like the new soul level 90 of Dark Souls 3, but in Elden Ring. But I'll be at rune level 86 in order to open myself up to 2 to 3 other invader ranges, like rune level 94 plus 20, but also lower bounds like rune level 60 plus 12 and rune level 70 plus 15. So if you have an invader at one of those ranges already, you don't have to make a whole new build from scratch. You can easily convert one of those invaders into a mage temporarily, and revert the save if you end up hating that playstyle. Just remember to make a backup. Hey guys, re-recording this part here. Originally I wanted the event to be in early December, and I tried to get this video out a couple of weeks ago actually. But there's been a lot of stuff happening in my personal life that needs my attention way more than Elden Ring right now. And with that, and all of the travel around the holidays, I just don't know when I'm going to be around my PC and PS4 enough to find the time to stream multiple days in a row. So I think it's safe to say that this event won't happen this year, but hopefully will happen sometime in the first week or two of January. This will also depend on if we get any DLC announcements between now and the end of the year, so ideally I'd like to host the event before any sort of DLC release date, as a way to kind of invigorate the community heading into the release of new content. I'm hoping that this gives you all ample time and warning to prepare a new build or character if you're interested in participating. I know Elden Ring build making can be quite time consuming, hence why I'm putting the word out now about this event. If you're going for a brand new build, again, I'd recommend 81 plus 17 plus 7 as my personal preference, but seriously, do what feels most comfortable to you. Go higher, go lower, it's all in good fun anyways. I just want you guys to make the build that you think would be most fun for this event, and use that. So I'll make a follow-up video sometime in the near future with the exact dates and password for the event, so stay tuned for that sometime in 2023. Until then, hope you guys have a good rest of your 2022, and I will see you all in the new year. Alright, now you might have some rather large doubts about being a mage, and I think that's perfectly understandable. For the longest time in Dark Souls 3, I had my doubts as well, and to be honest, I still don't love playing as a mage in that game compared to Elden Ring. But I've personally found that Elden Ring requires a different approach to how we engage with fighting multiple opponents at once, and it's an approach that meshes the best with the caster style of play, in my opinion. The core philosophies behind how I make mages come down to 3 things. Number 1, keeping everything in front of you. Number 2, effective spell damage. And number 3, a weapon with stopping power. For those of you who are more melee brained and haven't necessarily made a mage build before, we'll go in reverse order because it's more familiar to all of you. Intuition says start with your spells, and normally I'd agree with you, but if you're trying out a mage for the very first time after making many melee invaders, starting this way will be more comfortable to you. So first things first, let's pick a weapon that you like. I know this is a mage build, but let's be honest, all of the mages that I make are anchored by a reliable, trusty weapon that can both aggress with running attacks and stop opponents that are putting the pressure back on you. This is why 2 of my mages run curved greatswords. They have beautiful running attacks with high poise damage, and the 2 I use each have Ashes of War with great damage and knockback potential. The weapon that you choose here should do some substantial elemental damage as well, so pick up something that either has decent faith or intelligence scaling. But that doesn't mean that the weapon has to be a unique somber smithing weapon necessarily. There are entire weapon classes that do all of those things that I mentioned before, but could just use an Ash of War with elemental damage to meet those standards. I know it's rather meta, but Flaming Strike is probably the best defensive Ash of War, and while Flame of the Redmanes might be inferior to Flaming Strike in a lot of ways, it still does quite a bit of damage at range while also having a very large hitbox. For non-fire-based Ashes of War, Ice Spear and Chilling Mist are both great alternatives too. Ice Spear has that initial startup hitbox and good range, while Chilling Mist buffs your weapon and creates area denial. There are many other great examples I haven't brought up, but there are a lot of options in this game. I would definitely recommend experimenting with a few different types of Ashes of War while you play through the game to get a feel of what's going to be effective and comfortable. Alright, so now you've selected your weapon and the Ash of War that accompanies it, but what kind of damage does it do? That's going to be your main damage type, and it's time to maximize that. Now, there are tons and tons of quote-unquote one-shot builds that are totally OP, but that's not a consistent type of build that's going to win you invasions against opponents with half a brain cell. And more importantly, it's not going to be a build that's fun to play with in the long term. We're not going for one-shots here, we're going for consistently decent to great damage. So we've identified what kind of damage type we're focusing on, be that magic, fire, lightning, or holy damage. Well, maybe not holy damage, we'll get there in just a second. You're going to invest a decent amount of damage points into that stat, probably somewhere around 30 to 40 depending on your level, but you're going to prioritize that damage type. We're going to achieve this aforementioned consistently good damage by boosting it with our Flask of Wondrous Physic, specifically with one of the Shrouding Crack tiers, which comes in a variety of flavors, or elements, I guess. So if your main damage type is fire damage, we go with the Flame Shrouding Crack tier, if magic, the Magic Shrouding Crack tier, etc. Each of these tiers add 50% to that damage type in PvP, which is a massive buff for this game. This tier is going to buff your weapons, your spells, and your tools that all synergize with the same damage type. You can even do 2 tiers if you want, like for the Briar's build I do a lot of both fire and magic damage, but it's easiest just to stick to one for a lot of builds, just for simplicity's sake. Plus with the other tier in your physic, you can focus on something for survivability, whether it be a Winged Crystal tier for light roll, or the Opaline Hard tier for the boosted damage negation. You might think that it's not a great idea to limit your window of good to great damage to a 3-minute period, but as you know, if you've invaded a lot in this game, invasions do not really last all that long. That 3-minute period is really your best opportunity to do the most damage that you can, and you should also maximize that in other ways. Given this short duration, make sure that you put at least 2 to 3 of your 7 allotted flasks as an invader into your mana, because again, invasions are short and you're never going to get run through all 7 of your health flasks in this game, you're just going to die. And hey, real quick, since we're talking about mana, I'd highly recommend putting anywhere between 20 and 25 points into Mind. FP costs on almost all spells have been lowered several times since launch, but a healthy amount of mana is always helpful to keep the pressure on, especially within those 3 minutes of good to great damage. And lastly, we're going to talk about the spells, and how they're going to keep everything in front of you. Spells are how you apply your damage while keeping all of your opponents on the screen at once. In Dark Souls 3, you'd keep all of your opponents on the screen in front of you, but you'd be running in and out of melee range while doing so, baiting attacks, punishing whiffs, keeping your opponents in stun with 2-hit combos, etc. But in Elden Ring, it's so much harder to keep all of your opponents who are in striking distance of you on screen at once, thanks to a couple of different factors. For one, the jump button makes the effective range of every weapon like twice as large as it ever was in Dark Souls 3. Even heavy weapons that lack good running attacks now have a massive effective range thanks to the jumping attack. The second is the sheer number of gigantic Ashes of War that just do stupid amounts of damage. Moonveil, the Sacred Relic Sword, the Blasphemous Blade, etc. all do absolutely bonkers damage with incredible range, and these are attacks that you need to keep an eye on, otherwise they'll hit you from off screen and obliterate you. The only way to keep everyone on your screen as a melee build, in my opinion these days, is to play very, very passive and only punish what is extremely punishable. And quite honestly, I hate playing that way. I hate just being the guy that you can never hit, that only punishes like the most obvious stuff. What's fun about that? Is it meta? Sure. Is it fun? Not really. So we go to spellcasting, because it allows you to keep your distance, see these doomsday type attacks coming, and dodge them, all while still applying your damage. But how do we land these spells? Well, that's actually the easy part. We assemble pseudo spell combos. You're going to want to set up your scroll order for your attuned spells by these pseudo combos. That way you can kind of cycle through them or start over as you please. I'm not going to list every spell pseudo combo out there, but I'll give you some good examples. Charged Magic Glint Blade into Star Shower is bound to hit something, but hits very, very hard if the Glint Blade lands. Night Maiden's Mist into Gravity Well or Collapsing Stars is an all-time classic, and let me tell you right now, you're sleeping on Night Maiden's Mist. Aspect of the Crucible Tail or Horns Knockdown will absolutely pseudo combo into Aspect of the Crucible Breath if you're able to land that first hit. And Black Flame Ritual is one of the best high-damaging smokescreen spells out there. Use it to hide the fact that you're charging, say, something like Frenzied Burst or Giant's Flame Take Thee, and then just blast your opponents into oblivion. If you're curious for more, I use a lot of these spell combos in my other videos. You can also check out people like Prin, Lepista, Cad Manson, and Draco Kimura, who all use really great spell pseudo combos in their videos. I'll leave some links in the description below. So the stated goal for all of these spells is to apply damage from a distance while keeping your enemies in front of you. But the end goal is to make your opponents realize that being pelted with Glintstone isn't a great long-term solution, and to try to roll under your spells towards you. This is now your opportunity to use the weapon that you picked out in step 1, and maybe hit them with your own big Doomsday Ash of War. And really, you should view your Ash of War as another spell that you can use at your disposal, because it's always a button press away. You don't need to scroll to the correct spell, just press L2. So I hope that gives you a good idea of how to approach spellcasting from the brain of someone who spent 6 years being totally melee focused in Dark Souls 3. I'd love to extend an invitation to any and all long-term casters, or maybe newer casters, in the comments to point out other things that I might have missed about mage crafting. So if you're looking for tips on how to make a fun and effective mage invader, I'd recommend looking below as well. I don't have too much else to say except to stay tuned for the announcement of the exact dates and times for this Age of Mage event sometime in the near future. I'm really looking forward to playing with those that participate in the event, and again, if you've never tried to make a mage before, now is the time. With that all being said, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one.